Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good day, everybody. Welcome to our China webinar and intelligence assessment. I have on the left Mr. David DeBatto, retired counterintelligence agent, U.S. Army. Below me, I have Mr. Robert Dougherty, retired CIA operations officer, and myself, Leon Baptiste, veteran of the United States Army and intelligence community. And welcome everybody. As we say in Mandarin, Sao Ni Hao Ma. Good morning, how you doing? Let's start with a few questions. Uh, First of all, I want your opinion. What are the intentions of the PRC in terms of the rest of the world? People's Republic of China, of course.
David, I'll let you take first.
Well,
Sure. Okay.
where I'm concerned, yeah, please go ahead. I'm sorry,
It's a
I was
very
going to say
broad question.
it's a broad question, but it's also probably the easiest to answer. China is incredibly aggressive right now, and very very simply, their goal, what they're doing right now, is to have a seat at the table. In fact, to be at the head of the table. They want to be number one. They haven't made any bones about this, and they're trying to fill in a vacuum, which unfortunately we've left in a lot of areas, including in Asia, their sphere of influence, and they're rapidly trying to fill that. And we're going to discuss this a little bit later, how they're trying to fill it. But right off the bat, their goal is to be the top dog and to take the place of the United States.
Yeah, I totally agree with David, and it's kind of like a full spectrum approach, right? It's just not trying to dominate militarily; it's economically,
Mm-hmm.
politically as well. So, I don't think, we've faced this kind of threat really in the past. I mean, you can talk about Russia, but Russia really cannot dominate economically. Their economy has always been weak. And in fact, back in the Cold War days that David and I remember, we used to call them the third world power economically armed with nuclear missiles. China has a very strong, thriving economy, and they have that capacity, as they've shown, to get into those economic markets. So it's a different threat than Russia for sure. It's a bigger threat in my mind, and I totally agree with everything David says. They want to be number one. They make no bones about it. You don't have to collect classified intelligence to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Their plan is straightforward and simple, and it's going to be with us for decades to come.
I agree. Their main goal is to have influence worldwide. They want to be consistently relevant, particularly in Southeast Asia. Um, to my surprise, or to many people's surprise, they have been incursioning into the African region, particularly East Africa, but not solely, also in the sub-Saharan region. They have been doing a lot of foreign investment, but I call that foreign investment for obviously for their personal nefarious reasons. There are normally when you do a foreign investment in a nation, you are helping one way or another the human capital, increasing the opportunity. Is a partnership with the host nation, et cetera, et cetera. Not with China. Their preferred, and I want to be very blunt about it, their preferred targets are underdeveloped nations because they can utilize their skills to um, draw them in, do whatever they want to. And I'll give you an example, which I've witnessed personally in Latin America, Panama. We don't want to go too out of the area, but they tend to deal with underdeveloped countries. Go below minimum wage for the workers. As I was telling someone before, I hear complaints about Amazon being kind of slave drivers with their workers. Uh, you haven't seen the Chinese. The Chinese companies, which are all subjugated to the People Republic of China government, they have to do what they're told. And one of the things of being relevant and a certain level of control that they're always seeking is the recruitment of assets for espionage, from industrial espionage to, you know, dealing with foreign governments. We've seen the cases. As a matter of fact, we heard about a case a few days ago where a British or a French high-ranking officer was captured. Passing on secrets. It's a common denominator. I guess they've learned from the old Soviet Union, those type of tactics, and they're literally taking it to another level using technology. So they're a threat. They're definitely a threat, and their intentions are to control economically first and maintain a political and military control over, particularly over Southeast Asia, which is they consider it their house, and nobody should be there. And it's a threat. It's a threat for every one of us. So,
Well, as Bob said, just to follow up, if I could, Bob made some of the really good points, and to follow up on what you're saying too, Leon, it's a multispectral or spectrum attack. And Bob said, we've never encountered this. Our most serious adversary during the Cold War, of course, was the Soviet Union. But again, they were a third world country with nuclear weapons. Well, China is not a third world country. They have a lot of nuclear weapons. In fact, they've recently started a vast modernization and increasing their nuclear capability, but they also have money. They are, I believe now, the #1 economy in the world, and they are throwing money all around. You mentioned Africa. Absolutely. They really, they take the long-term view of things. They're an old civilization, and they're willing to wait. And they're going into Africa, throwing money at underdeveloped countries, getting in bed immediately with the dictator, which is almost every African nation, making sure they've got that solid, and then they're just throwing money at them. They're building railroad systems, they're building highway systems, they're expanding the mines, they're giving employment where there was no employment, and they're just building influence economically. Where they can't build influence economically, they are expanding their military. They're not too embarrassed to do that either, and to go that approach. Donald Trump promised a 350 ship Navy. Well, guess what? China's built a 350 ship Navy. We're nowhere near that yet. So like Bob said, it's a multi-spectrum approach, and we haven't seen this yet, ever. And I don't know how we're going to deal with it yet. We're trying.
Yeah, and to add what David said, I mean, that economic infiltration, that worldwide pressure by them to expand their influence, as you said, Lee, I mean, even extends to the Arctic. And you think about that, they're pressuring now for a seat at the table in the Arctic region, and they don't even have a country that borders there. And there's a couple international organizations set up of the countries that do border the Arctic to try to work out issues dealing with the Arctic, since it's kind of an open region. China wants a seat at that table, and they're not even a part of the geographic club. And, they talk about a polar Silk Road. It just shows kind of that aggressive nature that David says, and a little hint of arrogance as well, quite frankly, that they want to have a seat in everything that's going on this planet because they feel it's their right to do that. And a lot of that's based in their history and culture, and we understand that. Just like the Middle East, just like Africa, just like Latin America, you can't really have a full understanding of a certain country's politics and future strategy without looking deep into their past, and that influences their behavior. And we know about all the foreign intervention and the meddling in China, and certainly that has happened in the past, in the far past and the near past. So that flavors a lot of their current thinking of not wanting that to happen again and expanding out their influence so it doesn't. But this is, as David said, this is an issue that is the #1 probably national security threat for us. It far eclipses that of the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans, or any extremist groups that we're going to encounter.
And which comes to my follow-up question, which is going to be pretty interesting and elaborate. What mechanisms does the PRC use to obtain their objectives? What are the things that they're doing actively to increase that power that they're seeking, that power hunger that they have? What do you guys think, please?
I'll take this one since I put David on the first one, put him on the spot. Yeah, look, on the intelligence side of the house, we already kind of talked about it. They have, as David correctly said, a long view, the long war view, right? And again, based on their culture and history of a long civilization, they're going to go about this the way they've been doing it for the last 20 years on the intelligence side of the house, which is slowly, consistently steal our intellectual property, steal our technology, whether through subversion, whether through espionage, whether through corporate espionage, as you pointed out, Lee. All of that is in play, and they're going to do it over 1,000 different points across the globe. And you just look at the sheer number of cases that we've had and uncovered in our country. You know, we just had a CIA officer arrested for spying for the Chinese. So it goes across both our military, our intelligence community, and our corporate sector as well, that this effort, and it's massive. I remember at one point I was working on the Joint Terrorism Task Force here in LA with the FBI. And at one point they were telling me they had identified between 200 and 300 companies in the Southern California area alone that were linked to or directly controlled by the PRC. That's a stunning number. And that in this small region totally overwhelms the FBI's ability to monitor that from a counterintelligence perspective. So this stealing of our technology and our intellectual property is a huge problem. If you look at the design of their aircraft carriers, it mimics the design of our aircraft carriers, and they're rapidly building those up. If you look at the design of some of their other weapon systems, as David will tell you, it just mimics. They stole those designs from us, and they're going to continue to do that. So to me, that's one of the mechanisms they're going to continue to use. And I think, as David said already, we are so far behind in trying to stop that drain of our technology that is hard won. We spent lots of money and lots of brain power to develop and to innovate, and not only in the military sector, in the regular private sector technology. And we're in a lot of cases just giving that away, or it's going out the back door, and they're going to try to produce it cheaper and sell it worldwide to expand their influence.
Well, Bob, also, as you know, we're uniquely vulnerable to Chinese espionage because, well, for a couple of reasons. One is we have a huge Chinese American community, and it's been building since the 1800s. And so there's a lot of networks here for them to exploit, and they do. Also, we have, I think the Chinese are arguably the largest group of graduate students who come to America, them and possibly India. And the Iranians, and what do they study? STEM. They go right into the most critical areas that we need for our defense. And so again, a lot of those, and you know this, Bob, a lot of the students that come here have already been contacted by PRC. They're here with a mission. They come here to spy. And so we are very, very vulnerable, more than many countries, because of the massive amounts of Chinese nationals, either that were born here or again, Chinese nationals that have moved here permanently or that are in our graduate schools. So it's an almost insurmountable problem for the FBI.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, gentlemen, particularly David, you hit the jackpot where you mentioned STEM, because it seems to me that they produce STEM professionals, science and technology, engineering, math, as fast as a master baker would produce bread out of a bakery. I mean, they have made a concerted effort in technology. And I'll give you an example. The People's Republic of China's Army Special Operations Forces. They were created in the late 80s because literally the Vietnamese were giving them some trouble and the border. Their special forces were literally kicking their butts. But over the last 12 years, they have made a very strong effort on building their Special Operations Forces teams. And I'll quote their concept of such. we are talking about um, the People's Liberation Army Special Operations Forces, which are intended to be a rapid response team for regional wars under high tech conditions. In other words, they're making an emphasis on technology usage even by their special operations forces. And I'm talking about uh, their actual soft guys. They are trained as far as I know, trained engineers, some of them pretty close to what you call a top level scientist. So the training is brutal, physical and mental, and these guys are able to operate in such a unique manner. There have been talk over here that there's been a lot of talk in terms of increasing our soft capabilities. I know the Global SOI Foundation is making an emphasis on that. We have our commander, the top head of the Joint Chiefs, which is a former Special Forces commander. They've been making an emphasis on our soft. It seems to me that the powers to be don't understand the need to really push our soft capabilities because the Chinese are building them up, guys. They might not have, say, psychops or civil affairs teams along with their soft teams as we do, but they're coming close. They
Yeah,
are,
and
it might be a marathon and they're just right behind us. So we have to keep that in mind and increase our capabilities, you know.
yeah, Lee, what you're talking about too is, and we haven't even talked about the cyber realm yet, which is a big part of this. But what you're talking about in terms of the mechanisms of how they're extending their influence is something that I think SOCOM and SOF are dealing with, trying to make that shift from, you know, fighting two wars in the Central Command and the CENTCOM environment, you know, shooting wars, and now we're making that shift to the Pacific, to the PACOM command. And it's going to be a completely different environment. It's not going to be a shooting war, not going to be in uniform necessarily, but it's going to be what we would call a near peer counterintelligence environment, as David will tell you. And so it's not, we're not going to be worried necessarily about a hot war, but we're going to be worried about that low intensity intelligence war is what it's going to be through surrogates and different things. And SOCOM is going to have to embrace that new challenge through all their elements, whether it's ODA, whether it's NSW, Naval Special Warfare, a Tier 1 JSOC commands, and they're not, I can just tell you right now, they're not completely prepared for that. And that's where a lot of the training is going to have to come in, and the knowledge from guys like ourselves and David and me, who've got an intelligence background, to teach these guys, now you're dealing in an environment that we're not shooting weapons at a violent extremist organization. We're dealing with the Chinese military and intelligence presence. They're very sophisticated. They're very good in terms of their human intelligence and their tradecraft. They're very good at what they do. They've taken us to town many, many times in terms of compromises. And it's a different way of operating. And that's going to be one of the big challenges as we make that, as SOCOM makes that shift and turns towards PACOM and the Chinese target.
And I agree with you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. One bright spot in all of this, to follow up on what Bob's saying, is the Army recently, about a year ago, stood up a new command, the Army Futures Command, in Austin, Texas, to deal with this specifically, as well as other issues. But it's primarily to deal with technology, to have a joint partnership with the civilian corporations, the civilian side of the house, and try to solve this problem. How can we be on the cutting edge again? How can we get ahead of the PRC? How can we be the leading edge again? So this is a fairly new development, but in my opinion, it's one of the most positive things that's come out of really the DoD for a long time. And if they can do the job that they have been set up to do, it may at least take a real bite out of this problem, because you're both right. We're now behind the curve on technology. We've always been kind of fighting the last war. That's not just a cliche, it's true. And we've never really jumped into getting ahead of the curve in technology. with cyber, of course, being the most obvious example, we're still fighting, well, the Russians, not to get off on that, but the election's 2 months away. We still haven't nailed that down yet to totally protect our electoral system, which is in the cyber realm. It's not going to be fought in the Fulda Gap in Germany. And we're just not there yet. But again, the Army Futures Command and SOCOM, I believe, is very well aware of this and doing their best to catch up.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. One of the things in my concept is two things that we need to make a huge emphasis on. We haven't made enough emphasis. Cybersecurity, which we are behind in terms of calculations were done, 250, 500,000 new cyber warriors are needed, because that's basically cybersecurity. The cyberspace is where the front line is right now in terms of warfare. That's just the way things have developed. And a better cultural knowledge and awareness of our opponents. It's not a situation that we can believe that we are here and that's pretty much it. We have to understand the culture. I mean, personally, I've been a lifelong student of the Asian cultures, particularly China, because of my martial arts upbringing. But we need to make an emphasis on understanding the culture because guess what? Our opponents understand us. Uh, they study us. Curriculum. I remember back in my native Panama, they gave us the history of the relationships between Panama and the United States. We learn about European culture. We learn about. I pretty much knew as much about the democratic ways of the United States before I got to the United States. So we have to make an emphasis from the ground up in terms of the knowledge that's needed to understand the different cultures, our allies as well as our opponents, because your friend today might be your enemy tomorrow. So be ready, as I say. Well, guys, let's follow up with a big one. How do we foresee the global future of the People's Republic of China? And I'll let you guys elaborate first on that one.
Sure.
I can go. I don't see them slowing down or taking their foot off the gas anytime soon. In the near future, there's two ways that it can go, and not to get political at all, but depending on what happens in our election is going to influence to some degree what China's going to do. That's just a fact. For example, if President Trump wins re-election, they are going to put the pedal to the metal, and they're just going to increase what they're doing now. They're going to foresee a continuing vacuum in many areas of the world, including Southeast Asia. They're going to try to fill it. They're going to try to fill the vacuum in Europe right now, where China is also flooding a lot of soft money, and as well as infrastructure. We already talked about Africa. They're going to continue to increase the size of their nuclear forces, their Navy, their conventional forces, their cyber capability, their special forces, which we've talked about. That's going to just increase. If Biden wins the election, they're still not going to stop. But I believe they're going to at least take a step back, put it on pause, because personally, I don't believe that a Biden administration is going to deal with China the way that the Trump administration's dealing with China. One of the things I wanted to throw out here that I don't know if Biden would do this, but with Taiwan, for example, that's another flashpoint happening right now. And it was a Czech politician of all people who took a phrase from our President Kennedy back in the 60s. And he said, "I am a Taiwanese," meaning I am in solidarity with you. President Kennedy said, "Ich bin ein Berliner." We are all Berliners now. We are in solidarity with you. And that had a tremendous effect on the Soviet Union at the time. Believe me, I'm actually old enough to remember that. Not well, but I do remember it. And it still reverberates today. Well, this Czech politician, not even the prime minister, and I can't pronounce his name, so I won't try, said that we are all Taiwanese now, meaning we are with you right now. That means a lot.
Yeah.
Words do mean a lot. And we haven't, meaning America, hasn't said that to Taiwan, hasn't said that to Belarus, for example, not to get off on that. We need that to be said in the future. We need to rebuild our alliances in the future. And I believe if we do that, whoever is president, that is going to have a tremendous effect on what China does. Right now, we're pretty much acting unilaterally in a lot of parts of the world. China senses this. They are filling this vacuum, and that will continue unabated until we confront them through solidarity with our allies, building up our alliances again, and confronting them directly, not shying away and not launching new trade wars, which hasn't really had that much of a positive effect so far.
Yeah, I completely agree with what David said, and just want to amplify that. You know, if you look, if you state that they're launching a full spectrum, yeah, I hate to use the word war, they're launching a full spectrum aggressive approach to what they're doing in the world, then the way to counter that is a full spectrum approach on our side. And we haven't done that full spectrum approach, not just militarily and through soft, but full spectrum. And that's what we need to do. And David's absolutely correct. Building those alliances again. I mean, the Japanese are very concerned about what China is doing in the South China Sea and near Japan, and are actually building up their military even more, as much as they can within the limits of the Japanese Constitution. We should be strengthening our alliance with the Japanese even stronger than it already is, with the Australians, with the New Zealanders, all those areas in the region. They're concerned about Chinese influence. The Indians, right? There's a great democracy there, very powerful economy and military. They're always concerned with what the Chinese are doing, especially vis-a-vis Tibet. That would be a natural ally for us to even strengthen our relationship with more to counter the Chinese influence. The thing that's working a little bit in our favor, and I used to kind of chuckle to myself when I'd get reporting like this at the agency, was in the bottom line, as much as they're expanding economically, in general, the products and the services that they offer are inferior in terms of quality to those of the West and the US. Not all, but a lot of them are. Oil infrastructure in Iran that's crumbling and doesn't work. Actual construction of buildings that are falling apart in Africa. These are just some of the stories. So ultimately, the products that they're delivering at lower prices, a lot of them aren't up to the quality that a lot of people want, but that doesn't matter. They're still spreading their influence economically, right? And a lot of this, let's call it like it is, we are to blame for this. I think there was a stat that the west of the Mississippi in the US, in terms of personal residences valued at over $1 million, the majority of sales in the last couple of years have been to Chinese individuals. So we are, and that's happening on Wall Street as well, by the way. We're not only selling US debt to China, we're selling a lot of our corporate infrastructure in terms of shares. Me personally, I would start cracking down on that as well. We're letting them take ownership of our country piece by piece. And quite frankly, it's all done out of greed because people are getting paid. And the Chinese capitalize on that, right? And let's not forget another thing here in terms of their influence. We're allowing them to covertly interfere in our domestic politics, as David said. Why has that not been addressed and that door shut? Not only are they interfering with the election process along with the Russians, they are funding, which is exactly what we would do, right? They are funding those domestic extremist groups in our midst, whether it's Antifa or BLM. I mean, they're funding some of that. They're helping cause some of that through social media and propaganda that's broadcast, straight from China or through third countries. So this is a major problem we have on our hands. And I agree. I'm more for taking a more hardline approach. I like some of the things that have been done already in terms of limiting the number of Chinese students, because that's just a total drain on our innovation and technology. But we need to do even more in terms of countering this full spectrum warfare that's been launched against us.
And Bob, you hit the jackpot regarding they're expanding their interests because they have an initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative that they created. It's basically a sprawling infrastructure a network of infrastructures that they are using to connect directly and indirectly with East Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, and nowadays even with the sub-Saharan region in Africa. So basically, they're using uh, for capitalism as a motive, even thought it's a communist regime, to expand their influences in all around the world. Uh, of course, we have all noted the espionage network that they have. I mean, they have been fantastic at recruiting uh, uh, um, assets, turning agents for their benefits. It's been absolutely off the charts, and we need to nip it in the bud, so to speak. We need to, from a technological standpoint, that's where it all starts, and avoid them, stop them from being able to finance a lot of things, a lot of projects here from nonprofits. They've been caught doing such. You name it, they have tried or they have succeeded in putting their imprint on it. And so we have to stop them, whatever it takes. It might sound harsh to some people, as you said, taking advantage of the greed of some individuals that will do anything for money, and I mean anything. But we just have to be hard, draw a very hard, strong line in the sand, because if we don't, well, uh, the sky is the limit in terms of the pain that we'll gain from it. So,
You know,
gentlemen,
we have to change our attitude, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, the American attitude towards greed, because and this has already been alluded to or discussed. Basically, right now, China owns Hollywood. They own all of the major recording studios and film companies. They own New York. I think they own Rockefeller Center. They own the TV networks. They own so much of the iconic real estate in New York, and that's just to name two. All over the country, we have allowed them through our greed to own not just iconic structures, but very strategic, important industries into this country that not only are vital to our national security, but actually influence the way that we think. If they own movie studios, if they own recording studios, if they own various manufacturing facilities, they dictate what we ingest, what we buy, what we do, what we think. And that's a very, very serious thing to contemplate. I personally believe we need to, if need be, pass laws against that, do something to stop the out and out greed that just says sell to anybody, which we've done pretty much, just open greed, including Wall Street. I don't know if that's possible, but that's one of the most serious offenses that we've been guilty of. And just one last thing, as far as Chinese aggression, one point that really stood out to me recently on the 70th anniversary of Communist China, which just happened, I think, a week or two ago. For the first time in their history, in those 70 years, Xi, the head of the Communist Party in China, wore a military uniform. That was no until recently. He in public during one of the celebrations of their 70th anniversary of their founding, wore a PRC military uniform. That's the mindset right now. It's changed very much. That was an announcement to the world. This is who we are. We are now number one on the world stage. And if we have to, we're gonna take it militarily if the soft money and diplomacy approach doesn't work.
That's such an important point that David made. That's just critical, because it's all about strategic messaging with them, right? It's all about the messages that they're going to send through their very subtle messages, but very strong messages. And I couldn't agree more with what David said about the insidious threat of that influence. If you really think about it, the slow control over media. I mean, we already know the issues with media in this country and the power that has, and the companies that propagate media. How much is Amazon and Google and Facebook and Twitter influenced by Chinese money? Look at the NBA, our sports. There's $1 billion in various forms flowing into the NBA from Chinese sources. That's an incredible power and influence. And if you look at that as a holistic approach, that you're influencing sports, you're influencing the movies and the TV shows, you're influencing the economic sector. That is, and I can't underscore even more what David said of the threat that poses to us in the long term. And yeah, you can think about it. What's the last major Hollywood movie that you have seen that has an anti-Chinese bias to it or depicts something very negatively with regards to China? Has there been?
Gentlemen, I'm
Yeah, go
sorry, I
ahead.
got to cut you off because we're almost out of time. But one thing I wanted to add to you, yeah, I was watching with my nephew a few days ago, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the last movie, and I was surprised that Huawei, a company that's been linked to industrial espionage pretty strongly, was one of the major investors in the movie. I was like, okay, wow. And Huawei is interesting because one of um, our agents at the federal level discovered their inner workings originally in Iran, because the nation of Iran, again, totalitarian regimes, really good friends with China, had asked them to literally conduct surveillance on their own people. So it's just amazing that knowing these type of things, we allow them to. But hey, we're almost out of time, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to having another webinar in the next few weeks, not too distant future. We'll let everyone know about it. In the meantime, please, as we say, CSA Ni and Saijan. Thank you much and goodbye.